Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all here, and it's great to be here in Lithuania. A beautiful, beautiful place. I live mostly between Bermuda and London, so wasn't too much of a hike like the folks who came from Singapore, but still a bit of a flight getting over here. Again, I'm the founding director of a social ecosystem collaboration platform called HUB Culture. HUB Culture is sort of a place that has one foot in the real world and one foot in the digital world. And it was established, as was just mentioned, back in 2002. It was one of the very first social networks in the world. However, it's not like a billions of people social network. It has about 60,000 members, and many of them tend to be CEOs, top management, and kind of thought leaders. So people like yourselves who are essentially thought leaders would be the perfect type of person to be part of HUB Culture. We have members and community members from all over the world, and we create spaces that enable people to interact and to collaborate. So I don't have a clicker. Is there a clicker? There we go. Thank you. So we were really early with kind of creating spaces that people could go to collaborate. And those spaces we call pavilions. And so we're every year in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and we've also created them around the world in places as diverse as Ho Chi Minh City or Rio or Venice, that sort of thing. So the network began in 2002, and we started creating these spaces and these opportunities for people to connect. And as we were doing that, we discovered that it was really hard to run the financial side of all of that stuff when you're showing up in Beijing for 3 months, because you can't get a bank account and you can't actually move money. And when you have people converging on a pool party in Greece or a beach concept or a beach club in Bermuda, they really need a way to be able to interact and transact with each other and with the kind of financial institutions. And so we actually then created this digital currency called VEN. So VEN is not exactly a blockchain currency. We do have what we call a block that runs all of the transactions with something that we invented called the Open Audit Initiative. But can those slides go up on the screen so people can see? I'm not sure. But the Open Audit Initiative creates like a kind of public key repository and string that shows all the transactions in a very kind of real-time audit. And as we created that system, we started thinking about identity, because really the regulators on the back of Bitcoin started talking to and looking at the world of identity and KYC and AML regulations. And so we looked at that and we said, oh, this doesn't really work for us because it's really expensive to run these types of transactions against an identity. But in a weird way, we already know the identities because it's all connected to a social network. And so essentially, we created HUB ID, which was a scalable digital identity system that could allow a customer or a member within the social network to add data points to their profile and to their identity, and then to tokenize that so that they can maintain a level of privacy, but still have a resolute and sort of usable government kind of sanctioned identity level for transactions in the financial system. And then off the back of that, we started building something called Ultra, which was and is a system for tokenizing assets. So those tokenized assets are something that we're really focused on right now, and we launched an exchange called Ultra in May. And the idea of Ultra initially is a centralized exchange, like there are hundreds of them around the world, but the real focus is to be able to tokenize digital assets. And the first digital assets that we're tokenizing are currencies and commodities. So we're right now in beta on 25 digitized currencies, including Ultra US dollars, Ultra euros, Ultra pesos, Ultra yuan, Ultra gold, that can trade in a peer-to-peer system in the same way that the VEN trades. And all of these things are then being extended onto blockchains for the ability to trade across blockchain networks. So that's really sort of where we've been up until now. Is there a way to get my slides up? Yeah, are we working on it? Okay, great. Because I want to show you a couple of pretty pictures. I sort of like pretty pictures because they are a little bit easier to look at than me. But while we're working on that, I'll start to talk about where we're going next. And where we're going next is really something that we call mesh governance. And this is an idea that I think is sort of a 2025 idea. It's not really practically available now in the same way that a digital distributed identity was not available 5 years ago, but now there are probably a dozen companies working on it. So I like to think of what we do as being really early at identifying kind of mega trends that are way out there, building use cases for our community so that we can kind of show how things are being done, and then watching as other people go and build other systems that are scalable. And we've always been focused on our network, on HUB Culture, because we have an amazing community and an amazing group of people who really take up all of our time just to kind of manage this company and that network. But recently, it really became clear to us that the idea of a network has become pervasive. And so in some ways, companies themselves are being replaced with networks. And the replacement of a company with a network means that, you know, you still have like the kind of functional tools of a company, but the way that a company operates, if it's going to be successful, is to think and move and act like a network. And the funny thing about networks is that they mesh. Like a good network will mesh. And so we see the future as a world, hopefully, where companies and networks, you know, as an interchangeable concept, and even like personas, which hopefully I'll be able to exchange and show you with some pictures in a moment, will actually begin to become a kind of like ultra-net. And this idea of an ultranet is something that can't be owned by a single player. Like, you can't expect that one company, I mean, okay, we live in a world of Google and Facebook, but let's just hope that we don't end up living in a world where one company or one or two companies end up kind of owning everything. And the problem is that's kind of where we're heading right now. And there's actually a very big risk, a very big danger, that that trend is set to accelerate. And the thing that's going to accelerate that trend is AI. Because AI is a technology, it's a mega technology, and it cuts not just vertically to create vertical winners, but it actually cuts horizontally to create horizontal, what you could think of as ecosystem winners. And that creates a very big problem, because if we don't figure out how to distribute and decentralize AI, we're going to end up in a world where a couple of systems are actually dominant systems, and to some extent they take over the very concept of companies. So this is an incredibly big risk. And then, you know, enter like the white horse, which we hope potentially can be blockchain. Because a blockchain, properly used, can decentralize that activity and decentralize the ownership across a number of nodes or a number of owners. So we're on a track right now in the legacy world where companies are starting to act like networks, and the networks are going to become informed by AI. And the reality of the AI is that, from what we're seeing internally and from the people that I talk to, AI is going to become systemic AI. And the idea of a national AI is not something that is actually out of the realm of possibility. The Communist Party in China, and people who are fairly senior in that party, have told me that they are planning to make the party an AI. So imagine the Communist Party moves from being a political party to being an AI. And the AI, you can see already emerging. It's happening with Sesame, which is the social credit system in China. It's happening with surveillance and the ability to monitor faces and then map that back against transactions. And very likely, very soon, it'll happen with the monetary system as well. And so an AI is really just a collection of APIs that are bundled under a kind of common neural deep learning network. But if China is going to move towards, say, a party AI, we can expect that in Europe we're going to see some kind of response AI that will probably be based on some level of, let's call it bureaucratic governance. So potentially not exactly like direct democracy, but something that is arguably in the best interest of the population, which is sort of, imagine Brussels as an AI. And some people like particularly in England, might not really like that, hence you have something like Brexit. But the idea of like not exactly direct responsibility or direct democracy, but some form of representative democracy. Imagine that in the form of an AI. And then, of course, you have the cowboys over in America. Myself being an American, like to think of myself as a cowboy to some extent. But you know, you have the Googles and the Facebooks and the Ubers and the Amazons doing this kind of like Wild West private company, it's all about me AI. So you have these like three systems of AI that are likely to emerge and cut radically horizontally across industries. So instead of having like vertical winners like an Uber and an Airbnb and a Facebook, you're going to end up with AIs that can cut really quickly across healthcare, across mobility, across governance. And so we're then faced with this issue of, okay, well, what about we the people? Where is the people's AI? Where is the people's AI system? And my belief is that blockchain offers the best opportunity for the people's AI to eventually emerge. And the way that that is going to emerge, potentially, is through the overlapping interconnectivity of networks. And so particularly the idea of mesh governance. So I still don't think I can show you my slides. So, and this is not here, so I'm going to have to do this completely by memory. But essentially the idea of mesh governance is that no single network, none of your protocols, whether you're EOS or Ethereum or Bitcoin or in our case Ven, is going to succeed at the level that's needed to over, say, like a 10 to 20 year horizon, if we don't figure out some form of mesh governance that allows these things to work together and to interoperate. And so I call this like inter-cooperability. So instead of interoperability, which is sort of what we think of with like the browser, we're probably going to see something emerge along the lines of inter-cooperability. So you'll have these various different networks moving together, but like moving in a kind of like harmonious synchronicity that properly executed will be greater than the sum of its parts. And this idea of inter-cooperability is dependent on something that I call perspective. So when you start looking like at a kind of larger level at like humanity and like science, the idea of like quantum science and quantum physics in the context of IT is like really just right around the corner. It's like this close. And the funny thing about quantum is that all the rules are a little bit different in quantum. Things are not quite the same. But one of the really interesting like base kind of determinants of how quantum activities sort of work out is perspective. So it's kind of like the Schrodinger's cat. What I really had up here were some crypto kitties, which I wanted to show you guys. And the idea of like, what is like the intergenerational importance of a crypto kitty? It could be the idea of Schrodinger's cat, right? So if you know the Schrodinger's cat model, it's like your perspective really informs your reality. And whether you are sitting here and you see that the cat is alive because it's visible, or you're sitting here and the cat is not here, so it could be alive or dead, your perspective actually totally informs your reality. And this is the case with all of our networks. All of our networks provide a platform for our perspective. And the ability to mesh those perspectives into some kind of single governance system is going to be the thing that actually blows apart reality. And so at the quantum level, this is actually best described as something called E8. Have you guys ever heard of E8? So I'd urge you to like go down the rabbit hole and Google E8. E8 is a kind of system theory of everything. It's a highly theoretical and not at all proven theory that essentially looks at the idea of like 8 dimensions. Like we operate in 3 dimensions. E8 theory looks at the world in 8 dimensions. And by adding these extra layers of dimensionality, you get like pretty crazy outcomes. In fact, those crazy outcomes actually look a lot like the things that you can observe in quantum theory. So in quantum theory, there are things like space and time that don't work the same way at the level that we operate at here, let's just call it from the human perspective. There are a bunch of other things that are observable in quantum theory that don't quite work with the natural physical world. But the funny thing about them is that they all maintain and show and form and sort of display a kind of what I think of as quantum elegance. They're actually, if you look at an E8 diagram, it's actually extremely beautiful. It's 8-dimensional, and it's completely connected. And you know what it is? It's sort of like a system of links and nodes. What it looks like is almost like a cell, but like made up of a bunch of dots and a bunch of lines that connect together. And they form this 8-dimensional kind of object and thing, but they're completely symmetrical and completely beautiful. And that's the way I think of this idea of mesh governance. And so some of the characteristics of mesh governance include the following. And these are my 5 points that I need to really kind of think about. One of them I think of as persona rights. So we all have lots of different personas. Like right now, I'm a guy on a stage talking, but when I go home, maybe I'm a dad, or when I'm at a nightclub, maybe I'm a crazy guy. And so we have lots of different personas, but we think of ourselves as having like a human right, but we're very quickly going to enter a world where we need persona rights, because different types of who we are at different points need like different rights, and they need different capabilities. And so the idea that you could have a persona that has some rights in this scenario and some other rights in this scenario is going to become very, very important. The other thing is exponential jurisdictional growth. So this is the great opportunity for Lithuania. It's actually one of the reasons why I came here, because we're doing a lot of work with the government of Bermuda. We just helped them pass the first digital currency law and ICO law. So while countries like Lithuania and other markets are issuing guidelines about these things, we've helped Bermuda actually pass the first laws that enshrine in law the actual rules for running an ICO and running a digital currency business or exchange. Now, the reason for that is they want to capture that market in the same way that Lithuania wants to capture and grow that market here, and literally a dozen other countries want to do that around the world. But what we really see is the opportunity for Bermuda, and what I would argue is the big opportunity for Lithuania, which, by the way, Estonia very much understands, is the idea of like exponential jurisdictional growth. And that's based on the idea of persona rights. Because, the reality is by 2025, most of us are probably going to have personas or footprints in more than one country. Many of you probably already do. You may have been born in America, lived in Hong Kong, spend your time in Bermuda and London. That's me. I have my footprint in like 4 or 5 jurisdictions. But what we see emerging is a kind of cloud governance structure that can become interoperable. And this idea of interoperable governance is kind of like the state-level answer to mesh governance in terms of its participation in that mesh network. The idea of having millions of citizens who are connected to Lithuania or tethered or anchored to Lithuania as a jurisdiction for a certain aspect of persona rights is going to become a reality. And the race is on to see which jurisdictions figure that out and are then able to entice people to join those jurisdictional archetypes. So we have persona rights and we have scaling exponential jurisdictions. One of the other things that we really see happening is kind of the end of money. So for mesh governance to really work, things are going to become fully and instantly interoperable. And we see the beginnings of this in the exchange markets for crypto. So, there are like 30,000 tokens right now that are waiting to get on Binance. And of course, Binance wants to charge maybe $1 million a token to get on to Binance. So that's actually then fueling a boom in other exchanges which are going to list other types of tokens. There are over 1,000 exchanges now listing tokens. But we see a world happening where the tokenization of everything is going to combine, there's my cue, yeah, where the tokenization of everything is going to combine with these exchange markets. And so that means that like a glass of champagne could become convertible to an ounce of gold, and an ounce of gold convertible to some digital speck of information that you might hold. And it'll become effectively instantly transferable in wide open exchanges. And this will become the glue of the mesh network. So you'll have your assets and your currencies, but they'll be interoperable across this kind of combined mesh. And it is the mesh that is the thing that will hopefully save us from pervasive governmental AI. So I think that's my talk.
Excellent. Give him a hand. All right, so where do they got to have questions. They're going to want to see the slides, and we had some technical, apparently, issues.
We got the slides up. Okay,
but
so
the
there's
slides
our
did come up.
Kitty.
But where do they get them? How can they get them from you? Where can they connect other than the breaks? Because we want to make sure that conversation continues.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do have to fly out because I'm on a 2 o'clock flight to an AI conference. But if you just email me, stan@hubculture.com, and just sign up. Please sign up at HUB Culture. You can get a Venn account. It's free to use. And you can actually start to build your own digital identity. We're the only social network in the world that offers you 100% data ownership of everything that you put and use inside the system. And we're working on being able to distribute that governance back to the individual for storage. But what we found is most people don't want to store their own stuff, right? It's like cold storage keys.
Awesome.
Can you just, if I could just really quick go through the automated general rules for entering agreements is called Agree. That's our system for tokenizing data around contracts and agreements. So anyone can go into Hub and load up a term, a condition, or create a legal template, and then export that to become an interoperable legal document for others to be able to use, no matter where in the world you are. And you can actually set that to any jurisdiction that is relevant for yourself, and you can set any terms and conditions that are relevant to yourself. This idea of like open terms and conditions is informing something called Bermuda Standard, which we aim to make a global interoperable governance standard that everyone can contribute to.
Awesome. We're going to have to give you guys the deck and get in touch with Stan, but thank you, bud. We're going to keep everybody on. Give him a hand.
Yep, thank you.
We're going to move right into right into our next speaker.